Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. A new report on policing in the city of Thunder Bay has just been released at this hour. Its authors are a 9-member panel formed to provide advice on how to address ongoing policing issues in the city. The report acknowledged there's a profound lack of trust in the community with its police service. In particular, First Nations communities want meaningful change to be delivered immediately. The 200-page report is called Building Trust Through Bold Action. Some of its recommendations include having the Chief of Police eliminate barriers to anti-racism measures, to have culturally appropriate services and relations with local and remote Indigenous peoples and communities. It also suggested the recruitment and promotion of more Indigenous and racialized minorities in the service. Joining us now is the chair of the independent expert panel, Alok Mukiger. Mr. Mukherjee, thanks for taking some time for us. As is pointed out in this report, there's been a lack of meaningful implementation of the over 550 previous recommendations from all the various other reports. Why are you hopeful that these new recommendations will be taken seriously?
We are hopeful for a couple of reasons. During the year that we have been doing this work and consulting with and engaging in conversations with people, we have seen that there's a strong expectation in the community, and we have seen some developments within the board and the service that are consistent with our interim recommendations in September, specifically the selection of a new chief who is who is coming from outside, who is Métis, who is very well connected within his community, and who brings senior level expertise in policing community safety from another perspective. We have seen the appointment of 2 Indigenous board members who are again well connected, grounded, and who bring a lot of experience, knowledge, and senior level engagement with issues of organization. The third reason, and we have seen that the OCPC, which appointed former Senator Murray Sinclair some years ago to look at governance, has now come back and engaged itself with Thunder Bay Police Services Board and the police service in a very meaningful way. The administrator has been very active, and the OCPC has extended the presence of the administrator into 2024. So we see some factors that are very positive. The other part why we are hopeful is that we are providing a blueprint for organizational transformation, as opposed to dealing with discrete issues like human rights or mental health or workplace culture. Our proposal is that there are some concrete things that the board needs to do, including its own strengthening its own capacity through board composition, through training, through access to resources. And we are seeing that there is organizational change that the service needs to make so that it has the capacity and the expertise to implement those outstanding recommendations from former Senator Sinclair, from the OIPRD. So our hope is that there is a mood for change. Mm-hmm. There are some pieces that are being put in place that are positive, and the selection of a new chief who brings some attributes that have not been there before. So I think all in all, the conditions are right for change to happen.
The City of Thunder Bay already spends about a quarter of its annual budget on policing. There's a push here for more resources for the Thunder Bay Police Service and its board, which will mean, of course, more money. At any point, was the idea of just dismantling the Thunder Bay Police Service considered, as many have called for?
Well, the idea was broached by some people in the community. The challenge is, what do you replace it with? Uh, it's not it's not like replacing a car that you can junk one and buy another. Building another organization, another service will take time. What do you do in the meantime? Our view was that if there's a different model of policing that is and community safety that is developed, where the Thunder Bay Police Service and the First Nations Police Services and OPP develop a formal collaborative model of policing, then I think we can do better. It's more practical. It is doable, but it also means that the federal and provincial governments have to come to the table, because relying only on the revenues of the city of Thunder Bay can take you only thus far. And as you point out, already a quarter of the budget goes to policing. But if the resources are optimized through collaboration, cooperation, working together, drawing on each other's expertise, cultural knowledge, professional knowledge, and so on, we can have a better, more responsive model of policing here.
Mr. Mukherjee, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time. Good luck with your meeting tonight.
Thank you for asking me.
Anishinaabe Nation, which represents 49 First Nations in Northern Ontario, said in a press release that the report shows how the Thunder Bay Police Service's leadership, quote, continues to refuse to accept responsibility for its failures and shows no signs of changing. NAN says inadequate investigations, mishandling of cases, and failure to address urgent issues are not a result of being underfunded. They are a result of a failure of leadership. According to NAN, without leadership expecting responsibility, it's impossible to expect that serious issues such as systemic racism can even begin to be addressed. A special meeting of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board is underway at this hour. Here to talk about the findings of the Thunder Bay panel is our Truth and Politics panel. Carrie Benjo is a journalist and editor of the Eagle Feather News, and Nigan Sinclair is a columnist at the Winnipeg Free Press and a professor at the University of Manitoba. Carrie Nigan, thanks for being with us. Carrie, let's start with you. There's been a lot of focus on the Thunder Bay Police and anti-Indigenous racism there for many years now. What does this report do to address the situation?
Excuse me. Reading through the report, I didn't have much time to read it, but it was really triggering to just know the amount of, just to understand a bit of the experience of the Indigenous people in Thunder Bay. And I do think that this report is addressing some of those concerns. Some very meaningful changes are being proposed. Whether or not those do happen remain to be seen. Like with all reports, there's always, the wording is always good, but it's the action that matters.
Nigan, same to you. Do you think that this report will help address the situation there?
Well, I mean, to be transparent, my father has previously investigated the Thunder Bay Police and offered his own set of recommendations. So this is long-standing. It's certainly been systemic for quite a long time in Thunder Bay, involving the atrociously bad relationship between the institution of policing, but particularly the justice system overall, and Indigenous peoples. Massive over-incarceration, over-policing, under-resourced ways Indigenous peoples interact with the system. What this report does is it yet again proves that not only are Indigenous peoples suffering from systemic oppression and racism within the Thunder Bay policing, but then also within the Thunder Bay policing, there is deep issues that continue to permeate and infect that police force. And while I'm encouraged by some of the recent hires that take place within Thunder Bay. It's a cautious optimism because for the most part, this is not about bringing in one person or two people. This is about realizing that there are ways in which the Thunder Bay police officers have resulted in the deaths of people, the ongoing oppression and over-incarceration of peoples. And it's not changing. It's happening still today. And it's happening, and by this report, seems to be even more so going into the future. So without the implementation of the calls within this report and others, it certainly will not change in the near future, and it won't change without wide-scale integration and commitment from all levels of policing in Thunder Bay.
Carrie, one big change that is coming soon, that's a new chief of police there. A Métis person will be heading up the police force. Do you think that could help the situation?
Any type of change where you're bringing in Indigenous people and their experience, it will have somewhat of an impact, but all the responsibility shouldn't be shouldered on one person. He is only one person, and he is only able to do so much. Like Nigan said, it's system wide. The changes have to come from all areas. And yes, that's a good start. It's a good start that he's there and he can bring his experience and his knowledge to the job, but once again, he's just one person.
Nigan, as you point out, your father wrote a report here. This report makes mention of 550 previous recommendations that have had no meaningful implementation. How hopeful do you think the Indigenous community of Thunder Bay should be that any of these will be implemented?
Yeah, and before we start wagging our finger at Thunder Bay, I think we got to remember that these kinds of reports and inquiries have been happening all the way since the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry in Manitoba, 1988 to 1990, and the hundreds of recommendations from that report have been collecting dust on the shelf now for 3 decades. So before we wag any fingers, I think the key is to understand that there is a real problem within the country itself when it comes to changing justice. But one thing that is really, I think, key with this report, and I encourage everyone out there to read it, the one thing that's really key to understand is that the problem is really in the ways in which we approach the issue. We approach justice as if the only issue of justice is when people enter into the justice system, whereas the fundamental flaw is that the justice system is a reactive system. It's not an Indigenous-led way, which would be proactive. We would never have policing that's only job is to find those who perpetrate crimes. We would also have a justice system that is fully integrated and making sure that the community is well cared for, feels safe, and that has healthy relationships within it. The police are only one part of that, but they might be the most important part when it comes to the issue of trauma. And trauma is something that is endemic within our communities, and that therefore police officers are completely incapable of handling what Indigenous trauma looks like, which is full of colonialism and policy, and understanding fundamentally that you can't just go in guns a-blazing when it comes to situations involving Indigenous peoples. You have to show extra care, extra kindness, extra sensitivity, and that way may lead you to a much better outcome. And I think that this report points to that as well as many others.
Carrie, Nigan, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks as always for joining us this week.
Thanks.
There has been a delay in the trial for Nathan Chasing Horse. Details on that and more after the break. welcome back. Indigenous leaders and environmental groups joined the Gitxaala Nation in their fight against BC's free entry mining regime. In 2021, the nation launched a BC Supreme Court case against the province's practice of granting mineral rights without Indigenous consultation or consent. This week, interveners voiced their opposition to BC mining practices in court. Under BC's current Mineral Tenure Act, anyone can acquire mining rights online by paying free using an automated system. The Gitxaala and supporters say this system needs to be overhauled and aligned with UNDRIP. The hearing runs until Friday. Gitxaala hereditary chiefs are an intervener speaking against staking without consent.
Basically, that gives them a priority right to that land, the priority to exclusively explore for minerals, as well as to have an economic interest in the land. And so the issue for Gitxaala specifically is that the area that was staked was actually found to be critical spawning habitat for Nass River sockeye.
We always want to hear what you have to say about anything you see here. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The man convicted of manslaughter in the killing of Six Nations band member John Stiers was back in a Hamilton courtroom. Peter Cahill heard victim impact statements from the victim's family and community. Al Sweeney of CHCH-TV in Hamilton, Ontario reports.
These were strong words from Chief Mark Hill of Six Nations, and he went further, talking about a sense of fear on the Six Nations Reserve in the midst of these events. The chief was presenting a community impact statement in the trial of Peter Cahill, convicted in the death of Jonathan Stiers of Six Nations in 2016. Cahill argued he was acting in self-defense when he shot Stiers as Stiers was trying to steal his pickup truck at 3 a.m. A jury rejected the self-defense argument and found him guilty of manslaughter. The judge is now considering his sentence. In court, Chief Hill said justice was not achieved with this ruling. He said it means Indigenous lives are meaningless. He went on to say that people on the Six Nations Reserve fear to venture out and shop in nearby communities. He said they're viewed as expendable, and he said they fear people will harass the family of the deceased.
There's so many emotions running through our community. There's not just this case, but obviously with what we've endured with the residential schools, the day school. So I think there's a number of things that have been adding up. But I think most importantly, it's about making sure that our community feels safe and that they're supported through all these processes.
Friends and family of the victim, including Stiers' wife, also presented statements about the impact of the killing that left 2 young girls without a father. His aunt said to Cahill, "You took his life. You are destined to take on all of his trials and tribulations." And Stiers' mother said, "When his death day comes, I cry for hours." She said to Cahill, "I fear that your friends don't come after me to get even."
And as an auntie, we're important in our community. The aunties, the mothers, all of us raise our community, so it's trying to keep them safe and protected, and we weren't able to do that.
In court, Cahill looked directly at the people making impact statements. In turn, when the defense introduced 57 character references, including one from his wife, Cahill wiped his eyes. The references praised him as a well-liked and respected, gentle, and non-violent person. Defense lawyer Jeffrey Manishin also said, "Racism is not part of this offense, with no connection to the historic bad treatment of First Nations people." And he said the sentencing of Cahill should not reflect the crimes of others. So as the judge considers the sentence, the Crown is calling for 8 to 12 years in prison for Cahill. Now, the minimum for manslaughter is 4 years, and the defense is recommending that 4-year minimum. The maximum is life in prison.
Sexual abuse trial for Dances with Wolves actor Nathan Chasing Horse is on hold. He was indicted in February on 18 felony charges, and his trial was set to start on May 1st. According to court documents in Nevada, his public defender has asked that the proceedings be paused. They're asking the Nevada Supreme Court to toss the indictment. The charges against Chasing Horse include sexual assault of a minor under 16. Charges are also pending in Alberta and British Columbia, but there is no update on their status at this time. None of the charges have been proven in court. Time for one more quick break, but stick around. There's more to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Spring has finally arrived in Manitoba. And Dave Menzies shares this photo of tulips trying hard to make their presence known. We want to see your spring photos, so send them by email to share@aptn.ca to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, sunny and 15 for Fredericton and Halifax. -2 with snow in Kuujjuaq, +2 with snow in Nain. 25 above with the sun out in Montreal, 15 in Val-d'Or. Cloudy and 17 in Sault Ste. Marie, sun's out and 18 in North Bay. 10 for Thunder Bay, cloudy and 8 in Sioux Lookout. +1 in God's Lake, 4 above in Norway House. 7 for Winnipeg, +8 for Dauphin. +1 in Regina, 10 above in Saskatoon. 2 for Meadow Lake, 7 in Buffalo Narrows and La Ronge. Over in northern Alberta, sunny and 6 in Fort Chip, 11 above in Fort McMurray. +12 in Edmonton, rain and 9 for Lethbridge. 12 in Vancouver, 11 in Victoria. Sunny and 9 for Prince George, 8 in Smithers. -9 with snow in Old Crow, 5 above for Whitehorse. +3 in Yellowknife, snow and -7 in Norman Wells. -13 for Sax Harbor, 10 below with snow in Paulatuck. -8 in Baker Lake, 10 below for Arviette. -21 in Resolute, 13 below in Igloolik. Time to head over to Ottawa now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a look at tonight's episode of Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the news, we'll talk to head of the First Nations Chiefs of Police Association about why they have filed a human rights complaint against the federal government. As well, the housing gap for Indigenous people living in urban centres continues to grow. We'll speak to Justin Marchand of Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services about what is and what isn't being done to address the issue. And critical nursing shortages continue to plague Northern First Nations communities. We'll have NDP MP Nikki Ashton on to talk about just how bad the problem has become. All this and more on tonight's episode of Nation to Nation.
Thanks, Fraser. Nation to Nation is up here in less than 2 minutes' time, presumably. My computer's not working. That's all the time I do know that we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday, though. For news anytime and more on anything you've seen here, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Stick around. Nation to Nation is next. We'll see you back here tomorrow.